Alrighty guys, welcome back to the channel and more Birthright. Today we're taking a look at the first of the non-human and Anshe realms, and that is the Gnoll Fells. So a lot of these entries are going to be fairly lengthy just because they've actually kind of given us like double or four-sided or four-paged entries on this, so there's a lot to cover for each of these. And this is pretty cool because this is definitely some of the areas where like it's less common to necessarily have campaigns. Not everybody has the expansion, first of all. It's one of the later releases, right? So typically Anawir tends to get most of the attention, followed by kind of the others. And until you get to like, you know, the boss and the Kanasi, that's somewhat uncharted territory. But and a lot of these are just some really unique, interesting realms, but also if you really want some like high-end play, like high-end campaigns, high level, Birthright definitely offers some nasty territories here to get involved with. So we're going to start with the Gnoll Fells, so a whole territory of gnolls, right, and other baddies. But the deep woods of the Grovnikavek forests blanket the craggy landscape characteristic of the Gnoll Fells. Like the creatures that give the fells their name, the realm is uneven and unpleasant, treacherous and forgiving. So alignment, more or less forget about that, but essentially it's chaotic, right? Now, of the provinces that there are, so to speak, only a few of the provinces can truly be called settled, quote-unquote. Chaotic and warlike by nature, the gnolls in the realm have done little to civilize their society or organize their holdings. Only a few exceptional creatures have managed to dominate their fellows successfully enough to establish rulership or holdings of any kind. So, yeah, when we think of realm, just more like a collection of provinces and territory as opposed to like an organized country here. So, note, scouts and explorers and soldiers from other lands have named the provinces of the Gnoll Fells. Gnolls care little for place names, borders, and the like. Brecht and Rurik scouts and warriors account for most province names, and we'll see that on the map here in just a little bit. Through the power of Yenogu's dark curse, Gus Feuerscorn, or Firescorn there if you want to translate it right from German, is a level 4 priest of sorts. Azrai bloodline, lawful evil. Interestingly enough there, lawful. But has managed to organize and control a good number of the gnolls of the Fell Kingdom, as his realm is sometimes called. Through him, the clans and small tribes of gnolls have established a primitive, brutal form of centralized government. So, the law that there is, the chaotic nature of the gnolls and the terrain, actually, of the craggy Gnoll Fells have made it impossible for any one family leader or clan chief to establish any sort of law holdings within the realm. So, more just enforcement through power here. Temples, an ambitious and exceptional gnoll, Gus, which we should probably Gus, Feuerscorn, or Goose, that'd probably be too far off, has converted nearly every gnoll of the Fells and a considerable number outside the realm to Yenegu's dark curse. His orders, commands are the only rules these gnolls will live by. So ultimately we have something of a theocracy here. Guilds, as such, gold, silver, and weapons have always appealed to gnolls. When the pirates of Grabentoad needed the dark pine lumber of the fells for their ships, the gnolls were happy to oblige. Now, something akin to an organized trade guild exists, mockingly nicknamed the Trade Gnolls by the Gravers. Thanks to another unusual troll named Noreg Torglide, so that guy is level 6 thief, and then a Andu bloodline of all things. Very minor somehow, 11, and also neutral. So very, very interesting there. And then sources, only the Dragon of Drachenward, which again, from the other entries when we did the Brechts, but something level 21 wizard and fill in the rest essentially. Controlled any sources in the Gnoll Fells until recently. Someone from Tuar Anwen has reached into Nis Anwen and made its Mavrail part of his or her magical holdings. So always a bit of a bold strategy to steal, in this case, a source from a dragon. The provinces, so Gus has moved slowly in his attempts at unifying the gnolls of the Fells and rules only 2 provinces, Mickelbraun and Schlesblut. The rest of the Fells are essentially uncontrolled. Now, he came of age fighting for food and survival among the high crags and deep valleys of the Fells. He's fought alongside and against Orogs, trolls, goblins, and even men, but his primary calling is not a warrior, he's actually a shaman. So let's take a look at the provinces here, and then we'll work our way towards the map. You have Holdane's End, Mickelbrown, Nordicht, Nis Anwen, Schlesblut, which actually I got a couple level 3s in here, Shutter Cliff, and Two Peak, probably because there's two peaks. But interesting one here, just sometimes even the province names, you could build some lore around that, and maybe even like something of an adventure or lore hook. So like Holdane's End, who was Holdane? Was he a Brecht? Was he from somewhere else? How did he meet his end? Doing what? So things you can work on there. But as we said, there's no law. Temples, he basically has it all. Guilds as above, and then the sources here are a little bit split. So the dragon still has most of it, but then someone from Tuar Anwen has come in and usurped a pretty big one, right? A level 9 source is insanely powerful, even by itself. So the map of it, which we can kind of get here, so kind of more of a skinny realm in that sense, but fairly far spread out north to south. So you got Two Peak, Shuttercliff, Holdane's End, so the north seems a little bit more uncivilized. You got Nordicht, Schlesblut, and Mickelbrown, and then Nis Anwen in the middle there. So, and again with Mickelbrown and Schlesblut essentially being the only two that he controls as far as the region goes, and obviously then the most populated, Nis Anwen, essentially derelict in that sense. So, moving on, unlike Orogs gnolls of Cerulean don't revere shamans or priests. They consider those touched by the gods as somewhat useful but inferior. However, not so Goose. He established himself as a hardy fighter before turning to Yenogu, and though many of his peers consider him strange, they do respect his physical power. Because of this respect, unlike most of the gnolls in the Fells, he can move freely within the realm, meeting and negotiating with family and clan heads. Other gnolls, when they leave the relative safety of their familial territory, become prey for others. Goose has begun to change that, using his shamanistic powers and Yenogu's dark name to cow his fellow gnolls into compliance, but still very much a wild realm. So he is a rare gnoll who can see beyond the immediate familial or band unit. He's managed to organize many of the Gnoll war bands under the guidance of Yenogu's dark curse, and has turned the wild land of the Gnoll Fells into the beginnings of a realm. Definitely the beginnings. His personal power and apparent charisma place him in good stead, and most of the Gnolls under his command consider him somewhat blessed, or at least extremely lucky. Weaknesses, though: forced to prove his right to rule at every turn, the four-sided Feuerscorn has not managed to establish any sort of law in the Gnoll Fells. When he does not pay close attention to his subjects, they fight amongst each other or waste their resources battling the other creatures of the Fells. So, and he does have an amazingly bad temper. It is very gnollish temper and doesn't alienate his followers, but he recognizes it as a weakness. Quite often, instead of using his superior wisdom or charisma to manipulate or win over challengers to his rule, he or his followers brutally massacre the challenger and his family. While this helps keep the other gnolls in line, it does waste resources and really isn't making progress, so to speak. With regard to the outside world, Gus is one of the few gnolls who recognizes just how large it must be, and he seriously underestimates Cerulea's size. As a result, he's an extremely naive negotiator and has been virtually cheated by those he deals with outside the realm. Still, making any trade or diplomatic contacts outside the Fells is progress for the emerging realm, and he is learning slowly. He does have some lieutenants. Because of his followers' unreliability, he's forced to have several lieutenants and henchmen. His most impressive include Zorgig, level 7 fighter, so pretty impressive, chaotic evil, and that's a troll, actually. Kurus, level 3 priest, also Yenogu. The Flint shaman, probably sure that's supposed to be blind, probably a typo, and Noreg Torglide, again the traitor. So pretty ballsy to have a troll fighter as your lieutenant there. So Zorgig serves as his bodyguard and strongman, leading a small band of trolls. Goose often sends this troop to handle rebellious Gnoll factions, Zorgig seems fairly intelligent for a troll. She hardly ever exceeds her orders where violence is concerned. Now, families of Flynn's... Oh, actually, it is supposed to be that way, sorry. Flynn's subspecies of Gnoll described fully in the Monstrous Manual tome, and haven't actually looked recently. I can't remember if that had actually carried its way up to 5th, but if not, something certainly unique here. Are occasionally found living in community with Gnolls and are considered good luck. That Kurus chose to be a shaman and serve Gus helped the priest of Yenogu establish himself with many Gnoll families. Kurus often travels the fells, inspecting Gus's holdings, and winning over more followers with his extremely charismatic to Gnolls nature, that is. A regent in his own right, Noreg Torglide might have died fighting his own kind if not for Gus. A thief by nature, Noreg's own family actually cast him out, #try to kill him, at an early age because he could not stop stealing from their neighbors, igniting feud after feud after feud. Noreg joined Gus out of desperation and managed to turn his thieving skills to the regent's actual advantage. So, current plans, then, Gus has seemed to be fixated on establishing a Gnoll presence outside the Fells even before he's really solidified his hold on his own realm, which might be overstepping. He has sent or led several expeditions into Gravesmuir and has established several temples to Yenogu there. Go back to seeing our entry on Gravesmuir. Outside of the dangerous Gnoll Fells, though, these holdings, manned by a band of Gnolls and other humanoids sent to raid the Brecht lands, have actually prospered. Gus often visits them or sends crews for news. And let's get into the army then. He does have a pretty big army as far as what you can expect out of a Gnoll realm. Large bands of Gnolls and often other humanoids live there. So in addition to the difficult terrain, an army would face D4 groups of monster units in each province, keyword each province, with the exception of Nis Anwen, which is eerily empty. Gus commands the following: 6 units of Gnoll Marauders and 2 Troll Legions, which the Gnolls are pretty decent as far as army cards go, but just the two legions of Trolls is huge. And certainly tackling them outside of the army scale, that's just a lot of Trolls to cut through for adventurers. Alrighty, continuing on. So normally each unit of Gnoll Marauders maintains or remains in its home province, 1 per province with the exception of Nis Anwen. And then if the ruler or Zoreg or Kurus travels to a province, the units can move into other provinces without incident. However, if a Gnoll unit goes from one province to another without one of those leaders, there could be trouble because, again, Gnolls do fight amongst themselves. So battles could break out between the units and they could destroy each other, which then obviously lowers the pseudo-standing army's number of units. The 2 Troll Legions, usually stationed in Michelbraun and Schlesblut, can move between the provinces without the presence of one of the leaders, but Gus nearly always remains with one of them. So, but nonetheless, still a pretty frightening little assortment here of an army. The Gnolls really, they're certainly not bad fighters, but almost the cannon fodder there to the Troll Legions, right? Imagine an army unit of Trolls. Is pretty nasty to contemplate. So let's get into the description of the realm. High, craggy peaks, unpredictable winds, but also unpredictable winding caverns, ravines, and a deep coniferous forest over the Gnoll Fells, and just covers it. Basically, it's just nothing but that kind of terrain. Extremely treacherous for strangers to travel. Adventurers and armies can find trouble enough without ever encountering their forces, right? And that's something to keep in mind. Yeah, there's all that stuff in each of these provinces as far as that, like the actual army goes. But it's still a wild, untamed kingdom. You got all the other stuff to worry about, too. Inhabited primarily by Gnolls, but also by trolls, ogres, hill and forest giants, spiders, and other dangerous creatures. The Gnoll Fells are divided into tiny territorial regions, and then Gus has only begun to break them down. Gnoll families live on craggy mountainsides or deep within forests and seldom range more than a mile or so from their homes, lest they cross into others' territory. Monsters, of course, appear to be less discriminating, and the sounds of battle often ring through the forests of the Fells as Gnolls fight giants, other humanoids, and even each other. And that's where we get essentially the Fell Kingdom appellation for that. So, again, a great site to, or just territory, like, again, for like mid to high level adventuring for players, whether they're Voss themselves or just coming from other regions. There's just, danger aplenty here. So if you want to run something almost like a, maybe focus a little bit less on the role play and just more like grinding out battles and stuff like that, and sort of power leveling through by killing enemies. This is a great one for that. But let's take a look at some important sites. Although danger lurks in every ravine, there are a few noteworthy sites. The capital, he hasn't really established any working capital, but the most impressive of the holdings are in Micklebrown, near Forgotten Lake. More than 3/4 of the Gnoll population live around the shores of Forgotten Lake in long, low huts or deep caves cut into the rocky landscape. And he's named it the city of Yenogu. So it's hardly anything like a human city, of course, aside from the fact that many gnolls and some other humanoids live in close proximity. The city seems nothing like a human settlement, in other words. Still strongly tied to their individual warbands, families, and clans, the gnolls have divided turf within the city and avoid crossing into other neighborhoods unless Gus himself directs them to do so. Speaking of that, he allows his people to live this way. It avoids trouble, but he is working to break down clan borders. The Gnoll infantry unit that guards Micklebrown consists of gnolls from most of the major clans and families. They have little trouble fighting side by side. He hopes that by sending this unit on occasional raids into Daikar Jigun, he can break the camaraderie into, or breed rather, camaraderie into the ranks. It's a slow process, but it does seem to be working. Alright, continuing on. During the summer months, ships from Graventoad occasionally visit Nordreich, dropping anchor near the mouth of the northern Anwanalach River, called Deathwater by the Gnolls, despite its elven name meaning Lake of Silence, and taking on lumber provided by the trade gnolls. They give the gnolls gold, food, and Brecht manufactured weapons in exchange for essentially the all that lumber, that quality lumber. Many gnolls now visit Nordreich during these landings. Curiosity, along with Gus's strict orders not to attack the Graber traders, has helped to break down some of the gnoll familial barriers for a brief time. Nordreich becomes a neutral zone for those gnolls able to travel there to see the strange humans. And that's also making these gnolls much more dangerous, because instead of typically crude weapons, they're actually getting quality manufactured weapons. Other sites, something must be said of Nis Anwen, or Death's Finger, as the province name translates. Until Gus Feuerscorn began establishing himself as a leader of the gnolls, this province was like any other in the Gnoll Fells, populated heavily by monsters and humanoids, but no more dangerous than any other. That was several years ago, though. Now it's become almost as fearful a place to the gnolls of the Fells as the Anwanalach River. Unless pressed by extraordinary need, no gnoll will enter that area. They believe it to be a haunted, evil place, populated by specters and creatures not of this world. In other words, the Shadow World, which brings us another creepy, potentially high level, and also very dangerous area to visit there and incorporate, just to make it, again, just a very deadly area for players to wander into, or maybe even be unlucky enough to be chased into. Natural animals and even monsters fled from there when this influence entered. Most believe that Tuar Anwen, the heart of the Grov Nikivik forest, is finally growing again, and they fear this more than any human or dwarf army. Gus has forced a few of his scouts to enter and has tried using Yenogu's gifts to determine what is happening in the province, but both have come to naught. So, fertile ground there for, again, players to experience maybe some potential horrors firsthand. Other important NPCs, Blocken Glorfinder, male dwarf, level 8 fighter, so pretty high up, and his adventuring companions have arrived. So, apparently lured to the Fells by stories of fantastic monsters and legends of hidden treasures, this Daikar Jigun dwarf has, over the past year or so, led at least 4 expeditions into Feuerscorn's realm, stirring up its inhabitants and generally causing no end of trouble. Blocken and his companions, 2 dwarves, an adventurous Brecht thief, and half a dozen hirelings, speak readily of their heroics amid the Fells. They claim to have killed several giant spiders, trolls, giants of all descriptions, and a collection of humanoids that make the mind boggle. When they return to Daikar's Jigun, Gravis Mule, or even a safe haven in Reslav, they may even tell tales of hidden treasures and magical items they have had to leave behind, but they will certainly retrieve once they have a few more able-bodied men. Hint, let's get the party interested in maybe just going on a, again, kind of hack and slash adventure, but also for some epic loot, especially to even really be adventuring here, they got to, again, be pretty decent level to not just get absolutely destroyed. And that could be one too where, fertile ground for the DM to come up with whatever they want as far as these unknowns and dangers. And that could be one where maybe it's like we're going in to get treasure and loot and all that, but really maybe we chew off a little bit more than we wanted to, and then it becomes sort of like a race to escape and get back with whatever little whatever loot they can manage to hang on to. But that could be one too if we're trying to like play this out over maybe a couple of sessions, a little campaign, maybe just an adventure arc. Maybe like the first few expeditions really just like things are going pretty well or even surprisingly well for the players. Maybe they'll get a little bit greedy, and then like on maybe second, third, fourth expedition, whatever, DM should just kind of keep that secret. But then that's when boom, things suddenly take a turn for the worse. They've gotten a little too greedy, maybe gotten some attention from things best left alone, and boom, things turn from bad to worse. Maybe some of the other hired NPCs die in horrible ways. And maybe it's just, again, just an absolute fight for survival for the PCs to get back. And maybe they get motivated enough to go back if they want to just eliminate the evil or whatever is there, or there's more greedy and they undeterred and want to have another shot at the treasure. Heck, maybe even some of the dwarves die here, and again, they're already pretty high level at level 8. Lots of things to potentially throw at them there. But here for the Gnolls as well, Gus would love to know where Blok and his party have hidden these treasures. At first he doubted that the adventurers had found anything of value in his realm, when he heard their tales through his contacts in Gravismill, but they keep coming back, which would be a strange thing, right? Why would they keep coming back if there's nothing there? Causing, again, more than their fair share of trouble and disrupting his holdings. Gus has placed a reward on the head of each adventurer. Goods and weapons worth about 500 gold pieces, double that for any brought in alive. And again, if the players get sucked into that, they might come to learn that there is a bounty on anybody accompanying them as well. So, different ways that can be approached. Finally here, DM secrets. The Gnoll Fells have a somewhat patchy history, but the DM can use this to his advantage when constructing adventures here that involve Gus Feuerscorn in his realm. Popular opinion is that Hjorig and the Gnoll Fells must have a pact of non-aggression. Nothing could be further from the truth, though. The Jarl of Hjorig allows the Gnolls of the Fells to travel through his realm because they don't raid his lands very often. They seem content to attack Daikar's Jigun and Gravismill. This stings his pride, but keeps his realm mostly at peace. That's about to change, though. Gus Feuerscorn, who controls no law holdings in his own land and rules only a few provinces in the Gnoll Fells, controls 2 provinces actually in Hjorig, and we've covered that previously. This, to the Jarl, is a slap in the face to Hjorig pride. The Jarl has offered a large reward, nearly 5,000 gold pieces in furs and other trade goods, to anyone able to drive the Gnolls out of his land. And again, going back to that realm description, that could be a huge incentive for the players. The Jarl will not commit troops to the endeavor, however, fearing he will stir up the Gnolls against his realm. And again, enter the PCs, maybe a whole campaign to drive the Gnolls back, but maybe the PCs look to do a little bit more than that and maybe just take those provinces for themselves. And then finally, perceiving success in his efforts to unify the Gnolls of the Fells through military service, Gus has decided to hire out bands of the Gnolls as mercenaries. When the ships of Grabentoad come next to Nordricht, he intends to send Zorgig and at least 3 units of the Marauders with the pirates of Grabentoad in exchange for mercenary payment. This could put a lot of cash in his coffers all at once and give the pirates of Grabentoad an actual powerful mercenary force. They could use the Gnolls to attack any nation on the Great Bay, and if the Gnolls were defeated, it wouldn't really hurt Grabentoad. So that could be something to contend with too. Maybe if the PCs are, let's say controlling Brecht realms, and suddenly they're already dealing with Grabentoad to a certain extent as far as enemies and adversaries, and then now suddenly the Grabentoad is kind of on the warpath, and it's not just them, but now they have like an actual sizable little mercenary force of gnolls for people to contend with on top of it, which again becomes a much larger threat that the PC regent would have to deal with as well. So all in all, pretty good one, guys. So the Gnoll Fells, definitely some high level, interesting adventuring, a lot of role play potentially here, but also a lot of just great hack and slash and really throwing some mid to high level, seriously dangerous stuff at the players, and a lot of mystery here too with just what's going on in that one province where there's really, there's no intelligence on it. Even the leader of the Gnolls here really doesn't know what's going on. He's lost those gnolls that he's forced into there to try and reconnoiter it. His magic hasn't gained him anything of that as well. And again, some hints of maybe the shadow world there and some undead. So, and if players aren't necessarily wanting to go in there, maybe the undead start wandering a little bit out of that province. Just maybe some random encounters here and there, but maybe it gradually leads the players into this province and the source and figure out what's going on there. So a lot of fun stuff, guys. Let us know what you think of the Gnoll Fells. How would you incorporate something similar in your own campaigns, even if you're not necessarily playing Birthright? What do you think of an actual realm of gnolls? So hit us up in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.